Hello. Well, true to myself, I wrote out my speech, and it was pages and pages and pages. It was a whole dossier. And I decided I'm going to throw caution to the wind. I'm not going to use it at all. Thank you. I have the tendency to go rogue. So I pray that everything goes well and that God gives me the clarity to be able to share this story because it's so important to me and it's so important to my life. So let's get it. All right. Well, a wise man once told me, every single person deserves a second chance. And thank God that he told me that because he gave me a second chance. And I wouldn't be standing here today if he had not. Now, on the flip side of that, after working in reentry for about 10 years, I came up with my own spin on it. And I believe that every single person, regardless of their background, deserves a fair second chance. And the reason why I put fair in there is because there's a lot of people in our world now who use reentry as a buzzword. They use it as a way to pacify themselves, to make themselves feel better, to get a tax break, whatever their reasoning is. That's what they use reentry for. But unfortunately, when we do that and we have our own agendas that are tied to helping somebody else, we put them into a corner. We back somebody into a place, a rock and a hard place, where they're not able to really get the fair second chance that they deserve to have. That's not fair to that individual, and unfortunately, it's just something that tends to happen in our reentry world. So that's why I put an emphasis on a fair second chance. Now for me, there are a bunch of things that run through my head when I think about reentry. The biggest thing is that it's hard. It's hard to come home. It's hard to face all of these different barriers. It's hard to become a good person again, especially when we have a world that teaches us that there's a certain look to good and there's a certain look to bad. People who look good are doctors, are lawyers. People who look bad are people who are formerly incarcerated, gangbangers, people who've gotten in trouble. And unfortunately, those roles start to make us biased. They start to make people think that you are somebody who you aren't. And when you're coming home, the last thing you need is to have somebody have a preconceived notion of who you are. So the issue is that I'm challenging you today to start to think about reentry differently. Start to think about what good and bad is in a different way. I mean, we've all seen the news. We've seen that there are bad policemen. Good Lord, we've seen that so many different times now. We've seen that there are people who are good who would not fit that typical role of what we think good is. And for me personally, when I was incarcerated, I met people who are serving life. They're never going to come home because of the bad decisions that they made. But inherently, those were good people. Those are people that gave me great advice. Those are people who opened up their souls to me and were probably the most honest and humble people that I've ever met. But our society says that because they had that record, they're a bad person. So my challenge to you is to look at things differently. And when we're giving second chances, give unhindered second chances. Give second chances that are humongous, that are scary to you because you may be gambling on the right person. You may be opening up somebody to have a second chance that they would never be able to have in their life, an opportunity at life that they would never be able to even dream of because of their background. So for me, my story is maybe a typical one, maybe not one that people typically go through, but a lot of people who are incarcerated have had similar ones. It's a high school kid, and I was lost. I unfortunately equated money and things with what my self-worth was going to be because I was going to a school where there was a lot of affluence, there was a lot of people who were very wealthy. And because I felt so lowly of myself and I didn't feel good as a person, I equated those things and those labels to what makes you a good person. That led me to start selling drugs. that led me to start doing things that I had no business doing. So at 18 years old, when most people are graduating, I was dealing with my first run-in with the law. After that point, things kind of started going downhill. I never really learned my lesson of what my self-worth was and who I was as a person. And so I ended up at 20-ish years old getting my first indictment, when most people my age would be learning about their careers or figuring out what they're going to do with themselves. I was sitting in a jail cell, and I was finding out that I was going to possibly do 30 years to life. That's a really scary prospect when you haven't even lived 30 years yet. And for me, it was one of those things where I saw for the first time who I really was and what I was doing. I was hurting the community. I was not a bad person. I was a lost person. I was a scared person. I was somebody who was thinking of all the wrong things and doing all the wrong things, not because I was nefarious or bad, but because I just didn't have a grounding of who I was or what I wanted to be or where I wanted to go. And I met a lot of other people like that in jail. I always laugh when people say, oh, you don't look like somebody who went to jail, because there's no look to somebody who goes to jail. When the jail cell is filled with people who don't look like they should be there. And that's probably part of the appeal of getting away with some of the things we got away with, is because we didn't look like we were going to do the things that we were doing, right? But the point of the matter is that these were men and women who, just like all of us, made mistakes, just on a larger magnitude. And some of them were going to sit there and pay with their life for those mistakes. And while I sat in that jail cell, I am someone who is hard-headed at best. We'll put it hard-headed at best. I really started to see that I didn't have strong role models. But I was very fortunate that God brought me a lot of people in my life. First and foremost, I had a wonderful mother and father. My mom's in this audience today, and she is someone who used to tell me, I will climb the walls. I will climb the walls to see you and make sure that I am here for you. Now, on the flip side of that, you know that they record phone calls, so that was not probably the best thing for her to be saying at that time. But she was a huge supporter of me. She saw the good in me. My father, who's now passed away, he told me, as he stood behind 6 inches of glass, that he loved me and that he knew that I was a good person. And that meant so much, because I didn't know that I was a good person. I'm sorry. I didn't know. And I had a chaplain who stood up and believed in me, and he kept coming to see me, and I kept getting annoyed because I didn't want to see him. I didn't think that God wanted me anymore. I didn't think that I was a good person. And he believed in me. And I had another lady who is doing life, and she told me, sweetheart, you shouldn't be here. You need to go do something with yourself. Stop that gangbanging. Stop that silly stuff. And go do something substantial with your life. And through those people, God's message came to me that I am a good person, that I can do good. So when I came home, like every person who comes home, I hit barrier after barrier after barrier, and it was hard. But I met a man named Brandon who gave me a real second chance. He allowed me and saw in me things I didn't even see in myself, because the system had beat me down so much. He allowed me to be who I am today. He allowed me to speak freely. He allowed me to explore who I am personally and professionally. And he gave me something that was unfettered trust. He gave me all of his trust. And as somebody who's formerly incarcerated, that's not something that we're used to just getting. We're used to having to earn it. We're used to having to coerce. We're used to having to really push someone to get to that point. And so I was given that second chance in life. I was given that opportunity to be able to become who I am today. And thank God that I did get that second chance, because now I am able to give it to other people. And I'm also able to stand here today and say what we do is not enough. We need to start giving people real opportunities to show who they are. We need to show them trust. We need to show them love. We need to show them diligence. We need to show them all of the things that we would want ourselves when we go into a job situation, when we go through life. Because at the end of the day, every single person deserves a fair second chance, right? Every single person deserves to be able to put their past behind them, to be able to move forward, to be able to be the community leaders they deserve to be able to be the family units that they deserve to have. They deserve all of those things, but they can't get them unless we provide them as a society the trust, the respect that they deserve to have when they come home. It's not fair to make someone serve their time more than once. They serve their time in jail, then when they come home and they serve their time again. So, again, my challenge is that when you leave here, give someone a second chance. Give them a real second chance. Don't care about what their background is. Don't care about what society says their label is. Go with your gut. Go with the context of the character. See them for who they are and who God has showed them to be to you. Give second chances, because if I didn't have one, I couldn't be standing here today. Thank you.